Good day. This is Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas. Today we have Mike Baselice. He's a pollster, a noted pollster, and saying it today, poll is no better than the person reading and taking the poll. A lot of people that are not official readers, they don't know exactly what they're doing, and they'll misread some things. But Mike's not in that category. He was born at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital in Philadelphia, and graduated from college at Drexel, the Drexel Dragons.
That's right.
And the first time, I want you to tell one story that's really good about the first time that the Dragons were in the NCAA playoffs, the big dance, and their opponent was Louisville.
Yeah. Louisville, and Milt Wagner, who was of all things from Camden, New Jersey, right across the river from Philadelphia, should have known something about Drexel, was asked what he knew about his first-round opponent, Drexel University, and he thought for a moment and said, I don't know. I think it's one of those academic institutions.
and the people at Drexel used that for years and years.
Love it.
They loved it. And I'm sure the athletic director at Louisville got a call from the president and said, talk to those guys before they do interviews.
That's right.
At least to give them some kind of indication. What did your dad and mom do?
My dad was in biomedical sales for years. My mom was a dental hygienist. She went to the University of Pennsylvania. They met in Wildwood, New Jersey, at the Shamrock Bar. My dad took me there a few years ago when we were coming back from a trip on the East Coast and showed me the very spot where he met my mother.
That's good.
He was from South Philly, the Rocky Balboa neighborhood, and she was from Drexel Hill. She went to Upper Darby. I think Upper Darby is more recently known for a high school of Tina Fey, the actress.
Right. It was on Saturday Night Live, back when it was funny.
Yeah, it was really funny.
Yeah. Looking at, you graduated from high school, then went to Drexel, and they're a member of the Big Six.
Drexel's a member of the Big Six. There was originally the Big Five, and for years they wouldn't let Drexel in. The Big Five was Penn, Temple, St. Joe's, LaSalle, and Villanova. And Drexel would play these schools locally, but they wouldn't just let Drexel in and make it the Big Six. I don't even know if they changed the name. It may still be the Big Five, but Drexel's in now. And they play each other, and they're all in different conferences, of course, but they have some kind of a local city championship.
They have so much talent in Philadelphia that there's in Camden and in other places in that area that you don't. If you recruit within 50 miles of Philadelphia, you're going to get great players.
Well, there are a lot of good players. My dad actually played ball in South Philadelphia with Tom Gola. And LaSalle won the national championship, I think, in '54 or something.
Right.
And there was just great pickup games.
A lot of tradition.
A lot of tradition there.
You're a pollster. What did you major in college?
Commerce and engineering. Drexel, being an engineering school, was really known for that, engineering. But in the business college, they had a program called Commerce and Engineering. So a third of our classes were all the mathematics and the basics that an engineer would take, with statics, mechanics, calculus, derivatives. We had the engineering physics and chemistry, thermodynamics. So about a third of our courses were engineering based, and I just like math. And I thought when I got out of school, I would go into being a stockbroker or something. And I actually interviewed for that. But one of my internships I had between my junior and senior year was in Dallas. My parents had divorced, and my dad came to Dallas, and I came down to check it out and really liked it after 6 months. And the company I was with made control panels for naval ships and power plants up at Dallas, Texas, up in North Dallas, actually Addison. And that company had me come back after graduation, and I monitored budgets and schedules. Engineers hate project controllers. I would come around and see how things were going on the project, and they would say, am I using too much eraser today? Go away from me. And so I eventually left that job because my path forward was to go to Livingston, New Jersey for the parent company, where they made these control panels, where they made the power plants. And I thought, that's not really a reward. That's a step backwards, going back up to the Northeast.
Right.
So I tried my hand at real estate. I left the job in Dallas after a year. In the June of 1984, I came to Austin, and I fell flat on my face. if you remember, there was a big supply of homes at that time. It was maybe an 18-month supply of 322s on the market. The last thing Austin needed was an inexperienced real estate agent. And so to make ends meet, I taught real estate mathematics to people that were getting their license. It was about 20% math and 80% contract law. Now, you're an attorney by trade, so you are a broker. You can be your own broker, but other people, most real estate agents and brokers have to pass this test. And it was really sad, Chancellor, because there were individuals that couldn't do a word comprehension problem. They really needed help trying to piece through what was important information and what was not important information. And a young lady was getting her license there that worked at the Republican Party of Texas. And she quizzed me and found out I was Republican and suggested I talk to her boss, Royal Massey, the late Royal Massey.
Oh, yeah, I knew Royal.
He was a good guy, Princeton grad.
Yeah.
And Royal introduced me to some lady running for Congress against one of the proteges of Lyndon Baines Johnson by the name of Jake Pickle, and that lady was Carol Rylander.
Right.
Became Carol Strayhorn. And we got 28% of the vote, and woohoo, I was off and running. I thought this political thing was, even though we lost, was interesting. So I went and worked at the state party in 1987 and put together the first formal Orvis Manual, Optimal Republican Voting Strength. And to this day, I still update that every 2 years.
You started that, but that's what that is nothing more than the information of each area, state representative, state senator, or U.S. Congress, what is the optimum.
Well, the optimum would be the high Republican vote. It's really an average skewed towards an overall thumb that says a good candidate with a good campaign should be able to get 2/3 the difference between the base and the high. If the base is 45% and the high vote getter is 60%, then 2/3 the difference is 55, not 52.5 in the middle. And I got a lot of credit, and the credit belongs to Kevin Mumau and Royal Massey, who were under the direction of John Maxwell, who was the ED of the party, and said, go calculate how well statewide candidates performed in all 150 state rep districts. And it was real helpful because you remember in 1984, Republicans went from 32 to 48 seats in the state house. And using this technology.
What year was that?
84.
84.
That was the Reagan year. It wasn't until 2002 that Republicans finally got control of the state house, but that helped with the redistricting plan that Republicans were able to put into place,
right.
Which I had some hand in that too. But I helped North Carolina, Kentucky, Georgia, all with similar plans. North Carolina actually got control of their state house before Texas did.
Right.
The story there was a state rep named Rob Grady, and he called me with Jack Hawk, the state party chairman, and said, yeah, we got your information because we sent out our formulas to all 49 other state parties. And some called, and I walked them through the process and helped them. And this guy, Robert Grady, calculated using Jesse Helms for a Senate race and somebody else, and they came up there on Orvis, and theirs were relatively lower than the Orvis numbers we had in Texas. But the point was to go in the South at that time, find where you could recruit candidates and win. Robert Grady was in like a 42.2% Republican district. And as he and Jack Hawk went around the state, they'd come to your state rep district and say, Kent, you're in a 52.2% district. If I'm at a 42.2 and I won, certainly you can. And they went out in 1988 and won 12 new seats.
Wow.
And they were off and running. No one individual should get credit for turning the South. Reagan helped spur a lot of things on. I got to give some credit to the Democratic Party because Southern Democrats were mainly conservative. And if you look at what Lance Torrance, my mentor, did, he had he had four types of partisan voters in his polls, helping Trent Lott and people in Mississippi and helping Bill Clements back in the day. What he did is he broke it up into Republicans, Democrats, and independents, but he took the Democrats and split them into conservative Democrats and moderate liberal Democrats. If you look back at the 88 data back then and most of the data he had in the 80s, there was about 27% of Texans were conservative Democrats. Now it's 9%.
Yeah.
Where did they go? They started voting Republican.
Party. Yeah. And they'd been in presidential elections, they'd been voting Republican and then voting Democrat. And so it wasn't like it was a difficult thing to move them. They were not comfortable. And they'd watch the National Democratic Convention, and it'd concern them. You know, they'd say, I mean, be watching TV with their spouse and say, "Honey, is that us?" And the person say, "No, it's not us." And they left, and they found a new place.
Like you?
Yep.
Phil Gramm and others.
Gramm, myself, and a bunch of Rick Perry was one of the ones, who's also one of your former clients.
That's right.
You helped him when he ran for governor.
Well, first for lieutenant governor. And Karl Rove was helping George W. Bush get reelected at a historic margin. And we were able to work with Rick Perry. And I remember we went through all the tracking day by day at the very end. And I remember coming up with my final numbers, and I had him winning by like 2.8% against John Sharp. And I think he won by 2.4. I think it's 2.4%. And we get Sharp right on the nose, and we're off 4/10 on Rick Perry, and the other 4/10 were off on the Libertarian candidate. And I learned a lot about demographics then, and how important they were in the polling. At that time, the state was about 5 points more Republican than Democratic. But when you came out of the field with data each night, doing 200 or 250 interviews per night, the data would skew a little bit more Republican than it should have been, sometimes 10, 11 points. Now, that's the way the state is now.
Right.
It's more Republican-Democrat, and that's why Republicans have all these statewide offices, every one of them. But back then, it wasn't quite that way. The last time the state was at parity was really 1994. Kay Bailey Hutchison wins the race for U.S. Senate in her reelect because she just won in 93 a special election against Kruger. And the base vote for the Democrats that year was somebody that a lot of people can't remember. That's why they're base votes. But she won 62-38 pretty much against Richard Fisher. And at the same time, Bob Bullock got reelected with 62% of the vote as a Democrat, and the base vote for the Republicans was the person that lost to him, Tex Lazar. So both the Republican and Democrat base vote was about 38%, and that was the last time the state was at parity.
That in '94, and Tex Lazar ran for lieutenant governor against Bullock. And how bad did he get beat?
By 24 points.
24 points. And Tex was a good guy, and I always liked him. Mary Spaeth is his wife, is a person that's a PR person, does a great job. And
got satellites set up on top of the White House when she was there with Reagan in the 80s so that he could beam out his message immediately.
Yeah.
That was technology.
They were getting close to the voter, getting a better shot at him. And also, I'd add Tex Lazar's son, Philip, was in my leadership class at Texas Tech. Fine young man and has a bright future. If you go on and look at the message, and I want to come back to this in just a moment, but Reagan was bypassing some of the national media by having that satellite dish and getting their message out to the masses. And Trump really did that in 2015 and 2016 and continued to do it and continues to do it today. He bypasses the New York Times, the Washington Post, that everyone gets the same story at the same time. And some of them not going to interpret it to the left as some of the ones that they're in there now.
Yeah, if you look at communications, how things have changed over our lifetime, it's just amazing. There's a great documentary called The Best of Enemies. And it was a documentary that looked back at 1968 and what ABC News did to break out of the traditional news cycle, because they were always behind NBC and CBS. You had Walter Cronkite doing CBS Nightly News. And the news was delivered by three middle-aged white men every night, pretty much the same way.
Right.
Where Walter Cronkite would finish his broadcast was, and that's the way it was, or that's the way it is, this date, 1967, whatever. And ABC News had this idea that they would get a conservative and a liberal to debate every night for an hour after the Republican convention, Monday through Thursday, and the Democrat convention. And, of course, the documentary doesn't go through all 8 hours of that, but it's the backstory and the lives of these two individuals. You'll remember Gore Vidal was the liberal, and William F. Buckley was a conservative. And I won't give away too much of it, because if you haven't seen it, you need to find this, and you'll find it on Netflix or something. And they almost come to Gore Vidal really got under William F. Buckley's skin, and Buckley really regretted that. He lost his cool. But it was the first time we really saw people really get argumentative. Now we have 5 people on the screen at one time all yelling at each other. And we can get our voices out beyond just 3 broadcast network systems through many channels, whether it's True Social or Twitter, which is now X, and so forth. There's many ways in which we can pump out information.
You know, when I was growing up in politics, the most important thing was your local newspaper. You know, I mean, they could have you on the front page, they could have you on the back page, they could do all kinds of things. And it was important because everyone, especially voters, got that newspaper every morning. And so, now it's insignificant.
Yeah.
It's completely changed. Talk about that a moment.
Well, a couple of things. I was a paper boy. I delivered the Philadelphia Inquirer. My grandfather was in the printers union, right? He actually worked to print the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I delivered it, and I got a penny a paper. And I was happy to have it.
Thought you had a good job.
I had a good job. I went collecting money, kept a little book, knew who was behind, got tips. It taught me a lot. And let's talk about more about papers locally. I remember when Jeb Hensling ran for Congress, and we had a meeting, and Senator Gramm was there.
And you were doing
Hensling's work, and and remember Jeb had been either a state director for Phil Gramm or something, and I know he worked at the senatorial committee as an ED, so he knew a lot about politics. And we had about 20 people in this meeting, and Graham's listening to us talk about what's going on. And somebody complained that in the district, which went beyond southeast Dallas, it went into
East Texas,
like Henderson County and Anderson County, somewhere in that area. And there was a complaint that they weren't getting anything in the paper in Athens about the race.
Right.
And Graham pipes up in all his great wisdom and says, "I'll tell you what you do. You get some of those contributors of friends of ours who are also advertising, like furniture stores and service stations or whatever, in that Athens paper, and have them call that editor and say, look, I don't expect you to endorse Jeb Hensling or anything, but by golly, you should at least cover the race."
Yeah.
And because they're advertising in that paper, guess what?
They did.
They're going to start covering the race. So, but now it's all electronic.
When I was running, in every little town there'd be a weekly or biweekly newspaper. And so the thing I would do, I would try to get the banker to be on my side and the car dealers, because they bought the most ads. And if they called the editor of the paper and said that we're going to bring you by, I want you to interview him, you'd get a good interview. And but those were the 2 most powerful people as far as advertising was going. And then, you also wanted the county judge and the sheriff. And that in the rural counties, that was a key thing.
Since you ran before Phil Gramm, I'm going to say Gramm learned that from you.
He may have. I've worked the rural areas. When I ran for state senate, Lubbock and Odessa were in the district. Midland wasn't in the district. But half the vote came from, half the population lived in Lubbock, a fourth lived in Odessa, and a fourth lived in the rural areas. But the 25% in the rural areas voted 42% of the vote. And people in rural areas, they feel like they got to go vote. They always vote. And so we spent more time in the rural areas, and most of those little newspapers, they're looking for something to run. And so they'd run, if you show up and have somebody with you locally, they'd take a picture and put it on the front page.
Well, you said something that's really critical about polling. It's often missed. Population is a lot different than voter turnout.
Yeah.
And if 42% of the vote was coming out of the rural counties, then 42% of the interviews in a poll should come out of those counties, not 25%.
Right.
We don't base it off of population. We don't even base it off of voter registration. We should base it off of voter turnout.
Right.
That's how I was able to get Henry Bonilla's work back in '92 when he first ran. He had 2 parts of his district. I think they were each about 18% registration. Laredo was 18%, and his part of Bexar County was 18%. But Bexar County turned out 24% of the vote, and Laredo only 12%. And I knew that. And when I went in and presented that, it was something that they took note of. that they said he's really fine-tuning his pencil on this.
Mike, I've used you before in commercial issues and as a pollster, and you're an excellent pollster. But the first time I ran for office, I didn't have the money to hire a pollster. So a friend of mine who's a professor at Texas Tech, Don Boucher, he read some articles about polling. And one thing that he came back and said, we got to do it the same way every time so we can see if there's trends. If we make a mistake, we got to make the same mistake every time. And so the way we ran a poll, we'd get the Lubbock phone book. Back then you had a big phone book and everybody had a home phone. And we'd take the first 5 people on the left column on the left page and we'd call them. And if we needed more, we'd drop down below that, but we'd turn the page. And so we'd call them and ask them these basic questions. And first poll we did, and we had students doing it, and that it was, I had like 3% name ID. And second poll, we'd done a little advertising, and I was up in the 20s. And the third poll and last poll was 10 days before, and we'd really been advertising quite a bit then. Showed me at 50 with an edge of 8 points, and I wound up winning 54-46, 8 points. And so I was a believer in polls, but I wanted to get to the point that I had enough money that I could hire somebody that was a real pollster. And, polls tell you a lot about a race and what you need to do and what the message should be, and they play a big role. As you start, you worked for Lance Terrence, and you did and he was one of the great ones. He did some polls for me. But as you started your own business, who were the first big-time clients that you had?
Oh, Rick Perry right away.
Yeah.
Rick Perry, that 98 race was a game changer for me because there was some competing information out that said that Rick and even Carol Rylander in her race for comptroller were up by 9 or 10. And that's when I learned that you had to look at data the same way. West Texas is more Republican than Democratic, but how much more Republican? So when we look at a 4-day rolling average of data, it's important to have the same proportion of Republicans and Democrats in West Texas. South Texas was much more Democratic than Republican at that time. It's becoming more Republican, but still not majority Republican. We can talk about that too. But so when you look at data by big markets like Dallas-Fort Worth media market, which was still about 30% of the vote, or the Houston media market, which is 25% of the vote, we need to know that we have a representation not just on partisanship, but age, gender, and race and ethnicity. Those are the 4 big things that we look at to weight by.
Go through those again.
Partisanship, race, ethnicity, because Hispanic Latino is not a race. It's an ethnicity treated by government for certain programs and countings as a quasi-race.
Right.
And, about 30% of Latinos consider themselves Anglo. The others, almost 70%, consider that to be their race. And then age and gender. Those are the big 4. When I started in the business, it was just important to get the right number of males and females on a geographic basis. Everything else followed into place because everyone had a landline. And the one thing that we did differently, and college students, by the way, are great to use for interviewers. They're educated, they can read a script. There's a lot of college towns that have phone banks in them.
Sure.
The firm I used to use has one in Sam Houston. I use a group out of state that has kids that are all in a small college, and they make great employees. But one of the things that we learned back in the 80s was we would take those numbers like out of a phone book, and we actually had a program that could print numbers. But we would truncate the last 2 digits and replace them. So if your number ended in 1234, we would replace that real number that belonged to somebody's household, 1234, with 1235, 1236, 1237, 1238. Then we go on to a new prefix and a whole new number in that county. And the reason we did that is because about 20% of voters had unlisted numbers back in the 80s.
Right.
And the only way to reach them was to invent numbers. And we found out that voters under the age of 35 were over 30% unlisted, where senior citizens were only like 10% or 8% unlisted. So if you were going to reach younger voters, you had to come up with a way to reach them.
You had to find them.
Had to find them.
It's changed with polling now that most people don't have a home phone. I mean, it's rare you find somebody that's got a home phone.
We're doing about 10% of interviews to landlines.
Yeah.
And they're very unproductive because people screen them more than even their cell phones.
What are they? How do you get the cell phone numbers? I mean, how do you get a?
They're everywhere. They come from a combination of consumer files, more than anything. A lot of your data when you purchase something, it's tied to your credit card and other means, is sold repeatedly. It's how we get into micro-targeting. Right now, we know on each voter maybe 1,000 plus different data points. We know if you're a foreign car lover from a 0 to 9 scale, a dog lover, cat lover, foreign travel lover, fisher, hunter, artist. We know a lot about people. And I've used this micro-targeting in a number of different states. We find commonalities. Oh, look at these guys. They both have, you have a button-down shirt, and this guy has a button-down shirt. She's wearing a button-down shirt, and they're all driving Ford pickup trucks. And this comment and this thing, and all of a sudden you find out there's certain commonalities about consumer behavior tie into their partisan behavior.
So
or
you go
on
after
initiatives.
Yeah. What you take an original poll in a political campaign, and you did the polling for my son-in-law in Fort Worth, who ran for district attorney in Tarrant County and who won, is now the district attorney there. But one of the things I looked at the poll, and it was an in-depth poll, one of the things it showed among Republican primary voters, and that's where his race was, is that Trump had 76% that thought favorable or very favorable, and he had 16% thought unfavorable. When you've got numbers like that, I mean, you want that person's endorsement when he's hitting 76%. And so he sought his endorsement and finally got it. But it was, it was an eye-opening experience to me of how popular Trump is with the primary voters.
And still is popular. He was popular. He was popular in 2020, popular throughout the early part of this decade, and again in the re-election, remains very, very strong among Republican primary voters. His endorsement carries a lot of weight. There was a congressional race, one of the 6 or so individuals that voted with the Democrats on the impeachment in 2021. We did some work for him, and a state senator got the Trump endorsement because Trump was not going to endorse a congressman for re-election that had voted to impeach him. And in a 6-way race, this individual not only defeated the congressman in the Republican primary of 2022, but won it outright.
Yeah, he didn't have to have a runoff.
He didn't need a runoff.
And he was a state senator, but he wasn't a congressman.
That's right.
And the congressman, did he come in third or?
Oh, second or third. I think he ended up.
But it was a
about 30%.
distance.
Yeah, I think he was second. I think he was close to 30% because the winner was 54, 55%. Not only that, 15% for the other candidates. His name was Tom Rice. Good fellow. I told him through our polling, you can talk about a lot of things for your messaging, but the more you try and explain away this vote for the impeachment, the more ground you lose. He called me up 2 days after the election. He said, "You're right. I felt compelled to explain to voters why I did what I did. It didn't help me. Probably wasn't going to win no matter what."
If anything, it hurt him because it made him mad. The ones that were pro-Trump, they got mad about it and worked that much harder. There was a guy in Lubbock, Texas, W.D. Dub Rushing was best businessman. And when I ran for office, he told me, he said, now you'll find out who dislikes your opponent because they'll all contact you. And he said, it's better to have one guy hate your opponent than 20 that like you, because the 20 that like you, they may work hard and help you, but he said the one guy that hates your opponent work day and night against him.
Right.
And I think there's something to be learned in that.
Well, and there's a flip of that, too, Chancellor. If you take the situations where things are going on in a campaign and it's time to lay a little definition on your opponent, and all of a sudden you're getting these phone calls, I was going to vote for you until you ran that nasty ad.
Right.
That is a great day, right? Those are people that are really for the other side anyway, calling to try and talk the candidate into simmering down the attack. And when you get those people saying, oh, I was going to vote for you until you ran that attack ad,
it's working.
Work it some more, put more behind it.
We hope you've enjoyed Chancellor Hance's conversation with Mike Baselice. Check back later this week for part 2, and we encourage you to like and follow this podcast and allow notifications. That way, you'll be notified when we release a new episode.